Quiet on set. Speed. And action.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart.
You know how to whistle, don't you? You just put your lips together and blow.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
What's in the bar?
Houston, we have a problem.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, not what she said. You're crazy.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Baylor. Get ready for a Mexican standoff. Light up your red apple cigarettes. Let's talk about movies. Today's episode's on Quentin Tarantino. Going to go through all of his movies. Enjoy the show, folks. Take your seats, grab your popcorn. It's time for your feature presentation. As mentioned, we're the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is any film you haven't seen is a new experience. So we're talking about Tarantino today. You guys know the drill. We're going to get the big man on the phone. Please welcome John H. Foote. So we're here today to talk about Quentin Tarantino, one of the most famous film directors in Hollywood, who has had a career that's spanned almost 3 decades. And I think something that's interesting about Quentin Tarantino is while he obviously takes a lot of inspiration from spaghetti westerns and the work of Sergio Leone and kung fu movies and Korean films, he's sort of carved out a genre unto himself. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I think it's extremely fair. I think, the term Tarantino-esque is now part of the lexicon when you're talking about movies. And he said once that he steals from everybody, but then puts his own original spin on it. And I absolutely agree with that. He does steal from everybody. But he steals from the best, and even when they're not the best, they're certainly interesting. And then he puts that unique Tarantino brand on it. And he came out of nowhere. He just exploded. All of a sudden, we had Reservoir Dogs, and Tarantino was in our midst. And it's never been the same. He's changed everything about movies.
Yeah, that whole attitude of stealing from everyone and then mixing it up and putting your own spin on it, it's something as a musician I can definitely identify with. I think that's a very natural mentality for a musical mindset. And of course, we know that music plays a huge part in a lot of Tarantino's films. The soundtracks tell stories in and of themselves. And with his first film, Reservoir Dogs, that's certainly true.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes back to Scorsese. Scorsese's film have a soundtrack. It's almost the heartbeat of his film. So in that sense, he's stealing from Scorsese. The interconnection of characters is Robert Altman. The grittiness and the honesty is both Sidney Lumet and, again, Martin Scorsese. And he's fearless in what he does. As a person, I can't say that I like Tarantino very much. I think he's unspeakably arrogant. I think he's full of himself. I don't think he's ever walked by a mirror without looking in it. And he's made some comments that I think are insipidly stupid. One of the most recent was that he said directing is a young man's game.
Right.
Well, my friend, he should tell that to Clint Eastwood, who's 90 and still directing, Martin Scorsese, who gave us one of the best films of his career last year, Steven Spielberg, Woody Allen. I mean, any of the guys from the 70s that are still directing are still doing pretty formidable work. So he needs to remove the foot from his mouth and give his head a shake. Because despite being an extremely gifted director and even more of a gifted screenwriter, I think, he can be a bit of a complete dick. And I think that's a pretty well-known fact around Hollywood.
Yeah. With his debut film, Reservoir Dogs, we got the first glimpses of a lot of recurring tropes and themes that would follow. Tarantino's films all take place in a connected fictional universe. we'll get into that in more detail as we go along, but the mention of things like red apple cigarettes that everybody smokes and certain names and locations that overlap. He started laying the seeds for this in a brilliant little heist film that doesn't really portray a heist, and that's Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, Reservoir Dogs, it just exploded out of Sundance. It was workshopped at the Sundance Film Festival, and he managed to get the script to Harvey Keitel, who liked it and had enough clout to get it made very cheaply, less than $2 million to get the movie made. But because Keitel was in it, Tim Roth came along, and then Michael Madsen, and the rest of the cast just kind of jumped in with him, and they went off and absolutely followed Tarantino. This guy hadn't directed a major film before. He talked the talk, and he seemed to know everything about movies. He had a nice encyclopedic knowledge of world cinema, but he'd never made a film before. But they trusted him, and the result was a pretty damn fine debut that holds up to this day. Not a lot happens in Reservoir Dogs. We see the heist. We see how it goes terribly wrong. We see Tim Roth gut shot, realizes he's an undercover cop, and then the rest of the film is about Harvey Keitel staunchly defending him, saying he's not a cop, when in fact we know he is. And it ends up with a Mexican showdown with all of them shooting each other. And was a really acclaimed movie when it came out in 1992, with one exception. The scene of Michael Madsen slicing off the young cop's ear gave them a hard time with the censors and a hard time with audiences. And interesting enough, Harvey Keitel asked him to remove the scene, and he refused. He said, "No, I'm not going to." And Weinstein said to him, "I want you to remember that we let your movie go out as you wanted it. I hope you remember that when you get offered your next deal." And he did. He stayed with Weinstein.
It's interesting that that scene is so noteworthy because when you watch the film, we actually don't see the ear being cut off. The camera shifts away to the corner of the room.
Yep.
But it has forever made the song "Stuck in the Middle" by Steelers Wheel so iconic.
It's terrific. And you know, the way Michael Madsen moves, you know what he's going to do. He's got evil on the mind. And the way he dances around and then moves in and just takes off the ear. And you're right, we don't see it come off, but we see the aftermath. We see the abuse that he's put on this young cop, and we see the ear in his hand and playing with it, you know, like a play toy. He's just done something horrific to this young man, and he's toying with him, clearly, because he's going to kill him. And it's something Tarantino does well. He makes the monstrous characters likable. You can't take your eyes off them. Michael Madsen's a monster in this movie, yet you can't take your eyes off him when he's on screen. And Tarantino does that through most of his films. The bad guys are usually more interesting than anyone else in the movie.
Are you aware of the part of the opening scene that gives away the fact that Mr. Brown, Tim Roth, is the rat?
Yep.
Yeah. When for our listeners who don't know, there's a scene where they're all in a diner and they're asked to tip and pitch in a buck. And Mr. Pink, Steve Buscemi, refuses to do so and has an interesting little monologue about why he doesn't tip. And when the actor's name escapes me, the elder gentleman who's in charge of the whole thing.
It's okay, keep going.
No, okay. Anyway, he comes back and he said, "Who didn't tip?" And he's ratted out by Tim Roth. So that right there is the reveal that he's the rat.
You're right.
The following year, we got the movie True Romance, which was written by Tarantino, but it was directed by Tony Scott.
Yeah, Tarantino had several scripts that he started passing around to the studios before and after Reservoir Dogs came out. And Tony Scott grabbed True Romance. And I think he directed it in the same manner Tarantino would have, because it feels like a Quentin Tarantino movie.
It does.
It's got the gallery of rogues throughout. Christian Slater. Brad Pitt is absolutely brilliant in this movie as a stoner. You know, James Gandolfini is terrific. The young Arquette girl is brilliant. I mean, she gives one of the best performances I've ever seen in a Tarantino film. That scene where Gandolfini's beating the shit out of her, and she's laughing and carrying on, goading him, you know, do more, knowing that if Clarence walks in, he's going to die. He's going to kill him. And it was just a wild ride at the movies. Not perfect, not a perfect movie at all. I wish the Elvis character had been a little better fleshed out, because that was Val Kilmer,
Yeah.
who's no slouch as an actor. He was doing a great job, but we didn't really see enough of him at all. But I quite like the movie. I think it holds up beautifully.
I do too. Sorry, it's Lawrence Tierney as Joe was the.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember there. Sorry, everybody.
The character actor from the 40s.
Yeah. So then in 1994, something big happened because Pulp Fiction came out.
This was like a seismic explosion in movies. I mean, you say something big came out. That's the understatement of the year, Nick. This was extraordinary. This was like an earthquake shook Hollywood. And Harvey Weinstein read part of the script on a jet going from New York to LA. And he got partway through and he called back and he said, what are you talking about? The lead character just died. And his script guy said, keep reading. And he did. And by the time he touched down in Los Angeles, he'd agreed to finance the movie for $8 million. And Miramax got into the movie making business instead of just distribution. And he wanted Daniel Day-Lewis. He wanted a great, big, expensive cast. And Tarantino said, no, I wrote this with certain people in mind. And he got everybody he asked for, with the exception of the Sam Jackson character. He wanted someone else for the role, and the guy just didn't audition very well. So he ended up playing, I think he's the bartender in the bar where we first encounter the main bad guy. Yeah. And Sam Jackson stepped in and did the part. And Pulp Fiction premiered at the Cannes Film Festival and was just an explosion. I mean, it literally erupted out of Cannes and just continued on. It won the Palme d'Or as Best Picture. It opened in September of that year to rave reviews across the board. I saw it at a press screening and couldn't believe what I had just seen. There was a second press screening right after the first, and I stayed for that one too, and then took Sherry to see it on the weekend. It just knocked me on my ass. Broken narrative, which I love because it makes you think about the movie. Beautiful performances. John Travolta is absolutely stunning as a heroin-addicted hitman, Vincent Vega. Uma Thurman is terrific, and she's hit and miss with me. She's either really good or she stinks, and in this, she's really good. Sam Jackson is extraordinary as Travolta's hitman partner who thinks an act of divinity has happened and he's not going to be a killer anymore. And Bruce Willis, there's just not a bad performance in the movie. It's terrific. It's got an energy. You know, when that guitar lick starts, when Honey Bunny jumps up and says she's going to blow away everybody if they move, and we have that surfing guitar and the Pulp Fiction logo comes up, from that moment on, it's got a breakneck energy that just never stops. And the actors give themselves over to that energy, and you have a movie that redefined movies in the 1990s.
Yeah, that guitar riff famously is from Miserlou by Dick Duke, famous surf guitar player. Also want to mention, you mentioned Vincent Vega, John Travolta's character. This was big in revitalizing his career, but as I mentioned before, that Tarantino's movies are all connected. Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs plays Mr. Blonde, whose real name is Vic Vega, and Tarantino has confirmed that though Michael Madsen's character from Reservoir Dogs and John Travolta's character from Pulp Fiction are in fact brothers, and there was plans for a Vega brothers movie at one point, but naturally, as time passed, the actors became too old to pull it off. But
I think also the problem with that was John Travolta priced himself out of the market. He was career dead. When you say Pulp Fiction brought him back, you're absolutely right. He was done. He was making shit like Look Who's Talking and terrible, terrible dance movies. He was finished. And this absolutely revitalized his career. He got the LA Film Critics Award for Best Actor. He was nominated for an Academy Award. A lot of people thought he would win. He didn't. He lost to Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump, which I thought was just. But Travolta was back. The following year, he made Get Shorty. Then he made a film called Michael, and his price went through the roof. And Tarantino couldn't afford him for the Brothers Vega. It was going to happen. It was going to happen at Miramax just before Jackie Brown. But he priced himself so far out of the market, they couldn't do it.
It's always been my contention that in 1994, the Oscar for Best Picture should have been a three-way tie. I honestly think that Forrest Gump, The Shawshank Redemption, and Pulp Fiction were all equally deserving.
It's a tough call. It's a tough call. I would go with Pulp Fiction for Best Picture and Director. It's interesting that Tarantino won every single directing award available to him that year, except the DGA and the Academy Award, which of course went to Bob Zemeckis for Forrest Gump. I love Forrest Gump. I think it's a beautifully acted movie. I think Tom Hanks is spectacular, and I love that it's metaphorical and a fairy tale for adults. Pulp Fiction, on the other hand, I mean, when I say it changed movies and movie making, it truly did on a level that hadn't been seen since the 1970s. This was a 1970s movie launched in the 1990s, and it had the same effect the great films of Scorsese, Spielberg, Coppola, Lumet had in the 1970s. And nominated for, I think, 6 or 7 Academy Awards. It won one for its screenplay. Should have won Best Picture, should have won Best Director, should have won Best Editing. Just a masterpiece.
Yeah, good year, 1994. The same year, a film that started with Quentin Tarantino but moved sort of far away from him was Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers. A story by credit is given to Quentin Tarantino, but his script was heavily rewritten.
It was, and I love this movie. I think it should have been nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, several Academy Award nominations. I love what Oliver Stone did with it. I'd like to see what Tarantino did with it, but he was doing other things. He was deep in writing Jackie Brown and didn't really have an interest in directing this once it got going. Oliver Stone did change it, and he changed it in many, many huge ways. Tarantino says he often doesn't recognize what he did with his film, but the essence is still the same. It's about how serial killers become celebrities. And Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis, for my money, are spectacular. They give 2 of the best performances of the year. Tommy Lee Jones is riveting. Robert Downey Jr. is perfect. There's just so many great moments in this movie. Beyond the fast editing and the cinematography and the different stocks of film and video and the gruesome, brutal violence. It's a dark, dark film. And in this country, right around that time, we had 2 serial killers who became celebrities, Paul Bernardo and Carl Homolka.
Yeah.
And this movie came out and showed us exactly how that happens. And it was frightening. It's a cautionary tale that deserved far better than it got. Some critics loved it, some hated it. Entertainment Weekly named it the best picture of the year, so did the LA Times. Others said it was unwatchable, which baloney. It certainly was not. I think it's a masterpiece.
1996, we got From Dusk Till Dawn. Now, this is a movie where the story was written by Robert Kurtzman. Quentin Tarantino wrote the screenplay. He co-starred in it with John Travolta, and the film was directed by Tarantino's best friend, another filmmaker who they call each other brothers, Robert Rodriguez. I have an interesting story about this movie. I happened to put on it on television one day, and I started watching it, and I was really, really, really into it. And I had no idea that there was a supernatural element to this movie at all. I thought it was just like a Quentin Tarantino style, Rodriguez style crime movie. And
Yeah.
then when all of the vampires shit started happening, I was like, whoa. So that was a big left turn that I wasn't expecting, but it's a pretty damn entertaining watch.
It veers off after that extraordinarily sexual dance by Salma Hayek.
Yeah.
It veers off into the supernatural and becomes something quite different.
Yeah.
And it works. I think this one announced to Hollywood, George Clooney is a big, fat movie star. And the guy could act too. He was a badass in this movie. He was a frightening guy, and it worked. It also announced and confirmed Quentin Tarantino should never act in a movie, ever, ever. He's brutal. He just shouldn't do it. He's a great director. He's a great writer. Be satisfied with that. But Uma Thurman once told a story. She said Quentin always wanted to be an actor, and he could be getting set to go on a $20 million movie set directing it. But if he got a call to do the worst piece of shit on television, he'd do it. And, he played Elvis, an Elvis impersonator on the Golden Girls. So, I mean, that tells you the kind of junk he would do if he was offered acting work. I like From Dusk Till Dawn. I think it's an entertaining film. It's pretty schlocky, and it doesn't hold up well, but George Clooney holds up well. He does a pretty damn fine job in this movie. It drives me crazy when vampires turn into monsters.
Me
I
too.
think the most frightening thing about a vampire can be is when they're just normal and then they grab you and drink your blood. Salem's Lot, Stephen King's great novel, is quite magnificent because of that very reason. An ancient vampire arrives in a small town and gets younger as he becomes more powerful. And to me, that's what a vampire should do. Why do women go to them? Because they're attractive. And the vampires in this film are not attractive at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And to me, this is an example of a film where vampires, the line between vampire and zombie gets blurred, and I think it needs to be very separate. Those are two separate things. But you're right, when they turn into monsters and stuff, I'm not a huge fan.
I was done. When that happened, I thought, oh shit, here we go.
1997, Quentin Tarantino did a film that was an adaptation of Elmore Leonard's 1992 novel Rum Punch, which became Tarantino's film Jackie Brown.
You know, the first time I saw Jackie Brown, I didn't like it. And I couldn't shake it. I went home and I could not shake it. I saw the press screening and I came out of it, and it wasn't Pulp Fiction. It wasn't what Pulp Fiction was, or more of the same. And of course it wasn't. He was a director, he was evolving. And I went back to see it about a month later and fell in love with it. Fell in love with everything about it. The blaxploitation element, Pam Grier, Robert Forster, again, two actors from the 70s who he brought back from career dead, and just so many great performances in the movie, and a great story. You know, a real labyrinth of a puzzle. It's a heist movie in a lot of ways, and people are betraying each other left, right, and center. Robert De Niro has a great supporting role as Lewis, the kind of half stupid bank robber who shoots dead Melanie in a parking lot, and cheers erupted in the theater when he shot her. She's following behind, teasing him, calling him Lewis. And he tells her, not another word, and she speaks, and he shoots her dead. And the crowd erupted. Pam Grier was a legend in the 70s as Foxy Brown and all these tough black women. I think she should have been Oscar nominated for Jackie Brown. The best performance that year, according to the Academy, who was dead wrong, was Helen Hunt in As Good as It Gets. Pam Grier blew her off the screen with her performance in this movie. I love the romance, the gentle romance between she and Robert Forster. They belong together, man. And when she says at the end of the movie, go with her, everybody's sitting, go with her, because they should be together. And a great film. Sam Jackson, again, unsettling, nasty, dangerous, terrific performance.
Yeah, Sam Jackson is a fan of the Toronto Raptors basketball team, and we got a little homage to that in this movie where he's got a Raptor bag. So shout out to Toronto. So I appreciated that. I took two viewings to really get into it too. That's interesting. I thought it was okay the first time, really loved it the second time.
Yeah, I think he had a huge amount of pressure on him after Pulp Fiction. It took him forever to write Jackie Brown. He eventually went to Switzerland to write the thing, and his best friends were saying he's scared. He's scared that he won't repeat Pulp Fiction. And Harvey Weinstein finally sat him down and said, "Of course you're not going to repeat Pulp Fiction. Why would you want to?" And that got him going. And once again, it was a long film, and Weinstein suggested some cuts. And Tarantino said no. He said, if you ask for any more cuts, I'm going to scream rape and go to the press. And that shut Weinstein down. But he again said to Tarantino, I hope you don't forget who let your movie go out as you wanted it to go out. And after this, Tarantino was known pretty much as the big gun at Miramax.
It was a while before Tarantino would do another film. In the years 2003 and 2004, he released, he wrote directed Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. Now, these are two movies, and they have distinct identities, but Tarantino considers them one film.
Yeah, I do too. But again, you're right. They do have two identities. The first one is kind of a Hong Kong martial arts extravaganza, and the second one is more of a Western.
Right.
And I quite like the Kill Bill series. I would have been fine had they released a 4-hour movie. I'd have gone to see it because
I would too, yeah.
It moves. Yeah. But Harvey Weinstein said, no, we should split it up. It's too big, it's too long. Let the audience settle in, get used to the characters, and then come out with part two a year later. And Harvey Weinstein was a lot of things. He's a pig, he's an animal, but he was a brilliant, brilliant movie guy. And his record shows that. With Kill Bill, he and Uma Thurman created this character on napkins during the shooting of Pulp Fiction. And she didn't think it would ever come to anything. He came back years later with a script, and she said, okay, I'm in. And she had no clue the training she would have to go through to get into the condition she had to be to pull off these martial arts moves and samurai swordsmanship. And this is as good, moves as fast, and is as violent as any Hong Kong martial arts thriller I've ever seen. It's terrific from beginning to end. As the bride, she is seeking revenge for what's been done to her. She wakes up years later after being supposedly shot and killed. Her baby has been taken out of her. I think it's 5 years since it all happened. And she wants revenge on the Viper Squad, the group of killers that she belonged to who have done this to her. And she makes a list and she starts working her way down that list all the way to Bill, who is played by David Carradine. Warren Beatty was initially going to play Bill, and this was the second time Beatty backed out of a film I wish he had done. He backed out of Boogie Nights, which was written for him, and he backed out of this, which was written for him. He thought that the kung fu would require too much physical exertion, and he wasn't sure at his age he could do it. I think he could have, and I think he would have been great. But David Carradine was just terrific. The supporting performances, Daryl Hannah, especially Lucy Liu. I mean, all of them just terrific. And the movies, both of them, are fantastic, back to back. If you watch them back to back, they're just terrific to watch because there's so much tone and so many tonal changes within each movie. So, big fan.
Yeah, definitely. Just massive, massive entertainment.
When I mentioned go ahead, Nick, go.
I love the speech that Bill gives about Superman in the movie too. I think
I thought you might.
yeah, that's really awesome because Tarantino definitely. It made me want Tarantino to do a Superman movie, to be honest, because he gets the character. He totally gets it.
When I say that part two was a Western, if you watch the opening of the story, shot in black and white, part of it, and we're often in the church looking outside, which is an absolute John Ford shot. John Ford used those scenes in The Searchers all the time. We're inside looking outside. So does Tarantino. And it's more of a seeking out movie. You know, she finds Bud, the brother. She doesn't even kill Bud. You know, he takes care of her, and then she comes back, and Daryl Hannah takes care of Bud with the poisonous snake, and then she and Daryl Hannah go at each other in the trailer. One of the great fights of all time. And then she's ready to move towards Bill. And great sequence there. You can tell that these two people once loved each other, and now they're mortal enemies. And man, she follows it through. She goes all the way.
Yeah, the venomous snake in question is a black mamba, and I'm a bit of a zoology buff, and you can tell when you watch it. They absolutely did not get a black mamba to shoot that scene because they're incredibly hostile and one of the most deadly venomous snakes in the world. And there's, unlike a lot of venomous snakes, there isn't any other snake that looks like a black mamba. So they had to achieve the shot otherwise. But I liked that, you know, just as a fan of Crocodile Hunter and all that sort of stuff, I like that he did his research and he got the right kind of snake for that. I want to mention that in Pulp Fiction, when Phil Lamar's character accidentally gets shot in the head, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson go to the house of a character played by Quentin Tarantino. The scene in which Tarantino acts in Pulp Fiction was directed by his friend Robert Rodriguez, and he was paid $1 to do it, did it as a favor to Tarantino. And in 2005, Tarantino returned the favor when he appeared as a special guest director for Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller's Sin City. Tarantino directs a scene where Benicio del Toro's partially severed head is talking to Clive Owen while they're driving a car. Robert Rodriguez, probably the subject for another podcast, but I just did want to mention that as we're going through Tarantino's filmography. Big
I
fan of
love
that
Sin
movie.
City. Love it.
Yeah, and it really it popularized the alternative adult themed graphic novel film genre that has since become quite popular. But yeah, so I didn't realize that going into Sin City when it said special guest director Quentin Tarantino. Thought that was kind of cool. In
Yeah.
2007, Rodriguez and Tarantino released a Grindhouse double feature. This is an homage to 70s Grindhouse drive-in, double, triple features. Each of these movies, one directed by Tarantino called Death Proof, one written and directed by Robert Rodriguez called Planet Terror. And they had a bunch of fake trailers that played before these movies that were directed by special guest directors like Edgar Wright and so on. Tarantino's installment Death Proof it's a slasher film, sort of, but it's about a stunt car driver played by Kurt Russell who uses his car to kill people.
And it reminded me a lot of the films from American International Pictures that usually played before it got real dark at drive-ins. They were, for the most part, they were stupid movies. They were exploitive, violence, chases, cars, girls, and murder, mayhem. That's it. And that's what it is. But when he casts Kurt Russell, there's an immediate weight to the character. Kurt Russell's a great actor. He always has been. And he's terrific in this movie. You know he's a dangerous guy the minute he walks into the bar. It doesn't matter that he's trying to be playful or, flirt with the girls. He's bad news. And they should run away as fast as they can. But they don't. And man, it's something, boy. He really takes those women apart. And they take him apart in return.
Yeah, I think Tarantino considers that his worst film.
I think it's his worst film. I think his worst feature film, his weakest feature film is The Hateful Eight. But I think this is the worst thing he's ever put on the screen.
Yeah, still relatively entertaining, though.
Yep.
We're now going to talk about a film that I adamantly and staunchly believe is Quentin Tarantino's magnum opus. I think almost 10 out of 10 people would say Pulp Fiction is his best movie. I think Pulp Fiction is brilliant, but I really, truly, and honestly think that Inglourious Bastards is Tarantino's masterpiece, where in the final scene, Brad Pitt looks right into the camera and he says, "You know what, Yudovich, I think this might just be my masterpiece." And that's Tarantino talking to the audience. I saw this film with a film school buddy who is fluent in German. This movie actually motivated me to learn a little German myself. I have never felt tension like I felt in the opening scene of this movie when Christoph Waltz's Hans Landa, the Jew hunter, visits the French farmer, and he is charming and witty and friendly and the ultimate guest, a complete gentleman. And you slowly realize throughout this conversation that this guy's hiding a Jewish family in his house, and Waltz knows it. And pardon me for being a bit crude, but my asshole has never been more clenched than it was watching this scene in a movie.
The minute he walks into that house, he knows the family's there. He knew it before he walked into the house. And the way he toys with that poor farmer, it's like a cat with a mouse. Before a cat kills a mouse, they'll torture it. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's an extraordinary villain, one of the great villains of all time, and he deservedly won the Academy Award for supporting actor. The movie itself is a fairy tale. And it pretty much announces that from the very beginning and goes off in a direction that I thought was terrific. It's a complete reimagining of history, which Tarantino has done more than once, and I suspect will continue to do. And it works. Adolf Hitler wasn't massacred in a movie theater. Everybody knows that. But wouldn't it have been great if he had been? And
Right?
wouldn't it be great if it had been while he was watching a movie that the Nazi Party financed about the heroism of the German soldier? Wouldn't it have been terrific if a Jewish girl was responsible for trapping Hitler in a theater and massacring him? I mean, That's where Tarantino grabbed people with this movie. That's this movie's great power, is that it's a what if movie that everybody wishes had come to pass. It's
Exactly.
beautifully acted by everybody. Brad Pitt gives a big over the top performance, but it works. And everybody is uniformly perfect in this movie. Best of all, Christoph Waltz as Hans.
Yeah, I love the reimagining history thing about it, and you're right. It's once upon a time in Nazi occupied France, and you know what you're in for. Tarantino drops you into France in 1941, and then all bets are off. Everything you know about history has gone out the window. I agree. Brad Pitt is amazing and very funny at times, along with his group of bastards. When I say I've never felt tension like I did in the opening scene, my buddy Dan, who saw the movie with me, he said he also felt the tension in the tavern scene where Michael Fassbender's character is found out, and everything leading up to that when they're playing the game and they're having the drinks. I also remember the scene Operation Kino when it's Mike Myers and Michael Fassbender and they're discussing the upcoming mission. I remember stomping my foot on the floor just laughing because the dialogue that Tarantino wrote for these upper crust British characters, I just thought was so on point when it was like, something to drink, sir. Yeah, balls in the globe. Make it yourself like a good chap. What shall we drink to? Down with Hitler, all the way down. Like it's almost Monty Python-esque.
Mhm.
Um, Great, just a fantastic movie, and it's got all the action and violence you'd want from a Quentin Tarantino movie, and it also is a window into film history. Like you said, Tarantino has an encyclopedic knowledge of that, and it mentions Leni Riefenstahl and things about the cinema of the time. I absolutely love it. I think it should have won Best Picture in 2009. I know we disagree on this, and you think it should have gone to Up from
Yep.
Pixar, which is again also a brilliant film. What did they both lose to? It
You
was
don't
the Hurt
remember?
Locker, wasn't it?
The Hurt Locker. Yeah,
Yeah,
The Hurt Locker.
yeah.
Although I would stand by Catherine Bigelow winning Best Director for The Hurt Locker. I thought her direction of that was sublime.
I'm with you
And
on that. I'm with you
she
on that.
actually surpassed it a couple years later with Zero Dark 30. I mean,
With you on
she
that.
went on a roll. Yeah, she was a phenomenal director.
Yeah,
I think Inglourious Basterds deserved the nominations it got. I think it deserved the wins it got, you know.
yeah.
And
I would
I
have
thought
started rioting in the street if Christoph Waltz didn't win.
there was no way he was going to lose. No chance. It was just so good, and he'd won Best Actor at Cannes. So there's no chance if he's up for supporting actor, he's going to lose. He was tremendous.
Yeah, it was the second year in a row when I was very passionate about the supporting actor category with Heath Ledger having won the previous year.
Yeah.
And 2 years in a row, two of the most iconic movie villains that we've ever seen.
Yep. Yeah, it was a good year.
Absolutely. And I'm also happy that Catherine Bigelow beat out her ex-husband, James Cameron. So I think the fact that Cameron and Avatar didn't win is a victory for everyone.
I think anytime anybody beats out James Cameron is a good thing. I don't think his ego needs any more stoking.
Yeah.
And Avatar was one of the most amazing visual experiences I've ever had. And I won't deny that. I come out of that theater knocked out and then got thinking about it. And it's really just Dances with Wolves in space.
Yeah. Or
But it is something extraordinarily visual. I can't deny that.
Yeah, for sure. In 2012, Tarantino continued with the spaghetti western sort of thing he had gotten into, and a film he calls a Southern, about a German doctor and a freed slave seeking to be reunited with his wife. We're talking about Django Unchained. Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz again, Leonardo DiCaprio. We talked about it with Samuel L. Jackson a bit. This is another really good movie.
And it's another revisionistic history film.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that the German doctor, who is also a bounty hunter, takes in a black slave that he's freed is quite something. And he trains this man to be a bounty hunter along with him. And in the process, Jamie Foxx becomes a lethal gunfighter. I mean, fast hands and no conscience. The dentist teaches them that, to have no conscience when you kill. And when they move from camp to camp to camp, the first plantation they go to is hysterical because Jamie Foxx has been permitted to pick out his outfit. And he dresses in this ridiculous blue dandy outfit
Austin
that I'm
Powers.
sure. So go ahead.
Sorry, it's like he looks like Austin Powers.
Yeah, and I'm sure he thought, this is really pretty, I'm going to wear this. But he looks like a complete buffoon.
Yeah.
And then later in the film, he settles into what he should be wearing, which are warm clothes in the winter and things that fit and things that allow you to draw your gun fast. But what he does well is shoot. And Jamie Foxx is an interesting actor. He's a comedian by trade, but he's also a very gifted dramatic actor, as we found out with his performance in Ray. And here he gets a chance to flex those dramatic muscles again. I don't know what Will Smith was thinking when he turned this down.
I know.
Not enough screen time was what he said. And I
didn't even
really
kill the bad guy. He was complaining that he didn't get to kill the bad guy, so he made After Earth.
a great choice. Great
Yeah.
choice. This was the first time DiCaprio played an out-and-out bastard. He'd never really played a villain before. He'd played damaged people, broken people, people bordering on insanity, but he'd never really played the bad guy before. And he did here, and he is a ruthless, arrogant son of a bitch as Calvin Candy. Even worse is his house slave, Stephen, portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson. And we talked the other night about him, and I decided that this should have been the performance that won the Academy Award for supporting actor in this year. He was astonishing as Stephen, just a treacherous, evil old son of a bitch who is even against his own people, which is the ultimate sin. African Americans had enough problems at this point in this particular time in history without turning against each other. The violence in this movie is extraordinary. I mean, this is a movie just bathed in blood. And the final gunfight that takes place in Calvin Candy's house with Django doing a standoff is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Beautifully choreographed, gruesomely violent, like horrifically violent, but it works. It works as both an entertainment and irony, because Stephen gets what's coming to him in every way. If the movie has a flaw, and it's got a couple, there's two moments in the movie where modern day hand movements or dialogue pulled me out of the movie. At the end of the film, Kerry Washington is sitting on her horse and she plugs her ears with her fingers. She plugs her ears just before it explodes. And I thought, seriously? Seriously? And then we get a close-up on Jamie Foxx with a big shit-eaten smile. And I thought, again, I'm out of the movie, and I shouldn't be out of the movie. Pulled me out of the film completely, which Tarantino rarely does, but those two moments absolutely did. The Ku Klux Klan scene is very funny. Don Johnson's got a great part as a plantation owner. Jonah Hill shows up in a guest role, and they're talking about the woman who made the hoods didn't do a very good job, but we can't offend her because it's so-and-so's wife.
Yeah.
Some real good humor there that worked. And a dark movie, a really dark movie that, again, revises history.
You know what took me right out of this one?
What?
Tarantino.
Wow. Yeah, I wasn't going to pick on him as an actor anymore. This time he's doing Australian.
It's so terrible. It's so bad. It's like
the only good thing about him being in the movie is how he dies. He gets blown up with dynamite, which is perfect.
Yeah. And a lot of people that I've spoken to don't realize that Marvel aren't the only movies that have post-credit scenes, and there is a post-credit scene in this movie, which is pretty damn funny. It cuts back to the slaves that Django has freed when he kills Tarantino's character and whatnot, and he just opens the cage and he rides away on the horse bareback, and it just cuts to their reaction shot after the credits roll, and one of them just says, "Who was that nigga?" And then it just cuts to black, and it's absolutely hilarious. So now we're going to talk about 2015.
We should if we can. I'm sorry, Nick. We should mention that Christoph Waltz won his second Academy Award for playing a variation on the same character, I thought.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer that he should have won the Oscar for Django Unchained. I think it should have gone to somebody from the cast, but not him. It should have gone to Sam Jackson, or
Yeah.
even DiCaprio would have made me happy.
As much.
And
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
and Tarantino won his second Academy Award for screenplay.
Yeah, as much as I champion Voltz's winning for Inglourious Bastards, I was not on the same page this year. I definitely don't have much of an argument against your opinion on Sam Jackson winning. However, that year my vote was definitely for Tommy Lee Jones in Lincoln.
It was terrific. I mean, that's hard to argue. It's hard to make a choice. I just think Sam Jackson portrayed a character so perfectly dislikable and intensely dislikable. It worked for me on every level.
I also don't agree that Christoph Waltz is a supporting performance in this movie.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
So in 2015, we got The Hateful Eight, which the script had been leaked, and Tarantino staged it as like a script reading with some actors first, right?
Yeah, and when it was leaked, he decided he wouldn't make the film. But there was such a clamoring for it from his fans and from the studios that he decided he would make it after all. And I like it, but I don't love it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in it to like. You know, there's some wonderful performances. Jennifer Jason Leigh has long been one of the best character actresses in movies. And I think she should have been nominated years ago for a performance she gave in Georgia. I thought she should have been nominated and maybe even won for Washington Square. She was terrific as an undercover cop in Rush, who gets addicted to heroin. She's brilliant. And she's brilliant here as Daisy, a killer who has a gang working for her. And it turns out she's thought long ahead of everybody in this movie. Even the guys taking her to hang. She's 10 steps ahead of them throughout. It's a big puzzle movie. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Some of this works, some of it doesn't. It's got some great performances in it. I love Bruce Dern. I am Bruce Dern's biggest fan, I suspect. And I love him in this movie again. And watching his reactions when Sam Jackson talks about what he did to this man's son is absolutely riveting. You can feel him just wanting to pull a gun and shoot him in the head. Kurt Russell is again terrific, as he is in just about everything. Walden Goggins is terrific as the guy who may or may not be the sheriff riding into town. You mentioned you like Tim Roth in the film, who's also very good. Michael Madsen is very good. It hasn't got a bad performance. It's the narrative that doesn't work for me. And when Channing Tatum shows up, I kind of went, really? Seriously? That didn't work for me at all.
Yeah, I have to mention something to our listeners. I think I mentioned it on a previous episode, but there is a scene in this movie where Jennifer Jason Leigh's character picks up this nylon string classical guitar, and she sings this haunting, beautiful song. And it's a very, very powerful and emotional scene. And Kurt Russell, his character, snatches the guitar out of her hand and smashes it against one of the poles, one of the load-bearing posts in the building that they're in. And Jennifer Jason Leigh's reaction is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And there's a reason for that. And that's because the guitar that is smashed is actually not a replica. It was on loan from the Martin Guitar History Museum, and it was a priceless, priceless instrument. And I knew this before I saw the movie. And I'm not going to lie, as a musician and a guitar nut, a little piece of me died watching it. But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever be able to watch this movie again just for that one scene.
Do you know what it cost them to pay the guys off?
Oh, God, tell me.
Take a wild guess, Nick.
Let me see. I'm going to guess $100,000.
Triple that.
Oh!
Yeah, $365,000.
All right. I guess that might have been a record at the time. I think Dave Gilmour.
Well, they probably overpaid to avoid a lawsuit, and because there was a lot of embarrassment. Kurt Russell paid half of it out of his pocket.
I'm sure he felt devastated.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. But a pretty cool guy, a pretty stand-up guy to do that, you know.
Yeah.
The other great thing about The Hateful Eight is the musical score by Ennio Morricone, which won the Academy Award, and the cinematography. It had been a long time since the movie had been shot on 70 millimeter, big screen 70 mil.
Yeah,
It looks spectacular.
it does.
The scenery in this movie is wonderful, and the way they shot it is equally spectacular and brilliant, brilliant, brilliant look to it. It's just the narrative. It all starts with a script, and something went wrong with the script, and mostly in the last third. I find the first 2/3 of the movie are pretty good,
Yeah.
but it kind of falls apart from the moment Channing Tatum shows up. It just kind of goes downhill from there, for me anyway.
Um, our next film we're going to talk about came out last year. I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was good. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably not in the majority. I found it kind of underwhelming. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was nominated for a slew of Academy Awards. It won Brad Pitt his first acting Oscar. I think it's got brilliant performances in it. It's Tarantino-esque, absolutely. I think the problem is the hype for me was too much. Everyone was sort of hailing it as Tarantino's best film, and I don't really think it comes close to that. But I know I'm in the minority in this. Why don't you talk a bit about it, John?
Well, as far as being Tarantino's best film, no. I think his best film is Pulp Fiction. I think it'll always be Pulp Fiction. I liked this movie more than you did. I think because I was alive when all of this went down, when the Manson family slaughtered Sharon Tate. And I remember the fallout from it. I remember the trial on television of Charlie Manson.
Yeah.
What I liked in the movie, what I thought they captured beautifully, was the sense of dread about the Manson family. When Brad Pitt goes to the Spam Ranch and just the women and a couple of guys are there, there's something really creepy about it. And you know something terrible is going to happen. If not there, then somewhere very soon. As Squeaky Frum, Dakota Fanning is frightening, absolutely frightening. And when the women turn on Brad Pitt, they just stand there with straight faces, just staring at him. And it's alarming. There's something really creepy and alarming to it. When they show up at the house to do the devil's work, as they say, which is to slaughter Sharon Tate, they go to the wrong house. They go to Leonardo DiCaprio's place, where they encounter Brad Pitt, who is like some crazy Vietnam veteran Navy SEAL super guy. And he just takes them apart. I mean, what he does to that one woman's head with a telephone is unbelievable. He turns his dog loose on them, and the dog does damage, but Pitt does the most damage. Of course, DiCaprio gets a chance to use the flamethrower that he saved from a movie. Imagine having that prop. Of all props to take, you take that home. You take home a flamethrower.
It's amazing.
He turns it on the woman in the swimming pool. So again, he revises history again. He has happened what everybody really wanted to happen after hearing what they did to poor Sharon Tate. They slaughter the Manson family. And it's great. It's great to see. The ending scene, to me, the moment where DiCaprio goes down to the gate and he meets the hairdresser, who was Jay Sebring, who was horribly massacred and murdered, and he invites them next door to meet Sharon Tate, is like DiCaprio, his character encountering ghosts. And if you watch just how he plays the scene, I think that's how he played it, as though he were meeting ghosts, because they were dead. They were long massacred by that point, and yet here they are alive. Margot Robbie in the film has maybe 20 lines, and yet she absolutely imbues the screen with Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate was a lovely human being. She was beautiful, she was kind, she was generous. Everybody liked her. And what a terrible, terrible way to die. The Manson family, women literally cut her unborn child out of her. That's how totally screwed up these people were. And you know, she was nominated last year for Bombshell. She should have been nominated for this one as well. She's terrific. She's just a breath of fresh air. And Brad Pitt is terrific in the movie.
Yeah.
I thought Joe Pesci deserved the Oscar last year, but I was okay with Brad Pitt winning.
I
He's
was
deserved it
too.
for a while.
I would have been happy to see it go to the Irishman for either Pesci or Pacino, but you gotta love Brad Pitt, and he is phenomenal in this movie, and I was not upset that he won. And he gave some pretty awesome acceptance speeches on the awards circuit.
He did, and it was entertaining to watch him win because one, he really wanted it, and he really deserved it. It's a terrific performance. DiCaprio nominated for Best Actor, solid performance from DiCaprio. I thought some of the people around DiCaprio were very good. That little girl was unbelievable. She was terrific. She stole every scene she was in, and she could have been a supporting actress nominee. I really liked Tarantino's recreation of television in the 1960s and Hollywood. Neon was everywhere. Movie theaters were everywhere and screaming what was on at the movie theater. And it was an exciting time to be in the movies. It was an exciting time to be alive in the 60s. And what happened to Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring ended that. It was the end of innocence in the 1960s. And I like that he chose to revise history a little bit and allow Sharon Tate the life that she never got to live.
I did really appreciate that. And like I said, there's a lot I liked about this movie. I've only seen it once. I'll fully admit I need to give it another go. Certainly.
I totally agree with you about the hype. They overhyped it. It opened at Cannes, and critics were falling over themselves trying to praise it. And I saw it, and I liked it. I liked it more than you did, but never once did I think it was the best movie Tarantino's ever made. Never once did I think it was the best movie of last year.
Yeah. That, of course, was Tarantino's 9th film. He's often said he's going to make 10 and then retire. I don't know if anybody believes that.
I don't. I absolutely don't.
Do we know what he's got lined up, or does he even know at this point?
I don't think he even knows. I mean, there's always talk of a Star Trek movie, but I can't see him ending his career on a Star Trek movie.
Yeah, that would be weird.
Yeah, I'm hoping he does something worthy of him, something big, something grand. He's talked about a war movie. Wouldn't it be great to see him go to Vietnam, explore the war in Vietnam? That would be fascinating.
I loved what he did in World War II, so yeah.
Yeah, Inglourious Basterds was fascinating. Or return to the 60s or even the 70s and make a movie about music at the time. That would be exciting.
Yeah, you know what? If you were going to get you'll never see it because of the estate, but if you're going to get a Jimi Hendrix movie or maybe about the music of the 60s, that'd be cool too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to
I'd love to see him make a movie about Janis Joplin. That would be wicked.
Yeah. Or all the above.
Yeah.
There you have it, folks. It's our episode on Quentin Tarantino. Thanks for listening. John, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 22. All about Mr. Quentin Tarantino. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to check us out on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, especially YouTube. Subscribe. Hit that subscribe button for this, all past, present, and future episodes of our official podcast. Got some good stuff coming up, folks. We're going to do an episode on Robin Williams and explore the 1980s. Got any suggestions for podcasts you'd like to hear? Hit us up on the interwebs. Let us know. Until next time, we'll see you at the movies.